All right. Um, we are looking at what I think is a great chapter. And I said it my before I started recording. We're looking at chapter 4. This is work and vocation, and he titles it a writing life, and that's an apt title. But again, I think it's somewhat of a vocation that is not always understood by. I mean, a writing life is not something that everyone participates in. Even a creative life or an expressive life, you could maybe say a painter or a journalist or a sculptor or someone that has this sort of output. And I think at the core of what he's talking about, and he does name that, is that he sees himself as a teacher, and writing is just the means or the manner in which he has brought that into being. But what I'd like you to do as we talk about this, if you haven't already done this when you're reading it, is to reflect on your own life and your own sense of vocation. I think that sense of vocation is a big part of how we think about that. What we do is not necessarily our vocation. Professionally, I would say I am employed as a pastor, but as of a vocation, I would say I'm a practical theologian. That has manifested itself in teaching, it manifested itself in national office work, and now is manifesting itself in pastoral work, where I get to teach throughout all of that. But I, like Palmer, would see myself as a teacher. That's my vocational call. As a practical theologian, I'm called to teach and I resonated with a lot of what he said in terms of just like not often, like I said, I don't always know where I'm going. I pick a passage and I explore it and I share with you all what comes out. But that sense of that's my vocation. So I don't see pastoral ministry as my vocation. I see it as a call in my moment the moment at the time. So I guess my first question as we enter into this conversation this evening is, how do you distinguish in your lives? And don't answer it now because there'll be plenty of time we'll come through. But I want you to just keep that in your head. How do you distinguish between your sense of vocation and there's a broader word for what that is in your life and your jobs that you have had. With those things in mind, I want to read two passages of scripture. The first, if I can get my computer to go to one, the first is a familiar one, and it's probably from Proverbs 16:9, and it says, I can pick a version, and let me see. ESV is probably the heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. NRSV says, where is it down? NIV says, in the human heart, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. And I think that it's a simple, kind of like train up a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it. They're maxims. But in that essence of what that's saying, I think that it doesn't, we often take that to mean we plan a course and then God directs us over here. And I don't necessarily think that that's, in their hearts, we plan our lives, but the Lord decides where their steps will take them. That doesn't mean that the planning that we did was futile or useless or pointless or not used or not employed, or God's not going to use those plans. It just means that we don't have the capacity to control, and that sense of what we do should define us less than the sense of who we are. And what I would like to make an argument for is that who we are is the vocation that comes from, and where I would say that the second verse, as I said, comes from Matthew 28:16-20. This is something you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. It's the Great Commission from the end of Matthew. And then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. And although there's a lot of passages that lend itself to discipleship and lend themselves to our sense of calling, I think that this is probably one of the central passages that defines our role or our lives as Christians. Is no matter what we do in the world, we are called to make disciples of all nations. We've been given the authority in heaven and earth. We are called to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Spirit, and we're called to teach. Although I make my living as a professional teacher in the role that I'm playing, that doesn't mean that, teaching, it can also be apprenticeship, it can be modeling, it can be walking alongside. There are lots of ways to teach. There are lots of ways to pass on these things. And so what I want to suggest is that that in this conversation, you'll have you have your jobs that you've lived into. You have your vocation in this world, and that's, for me, would be, I'm a practical theologian. That's the sense of what I do. That's the larger picture I teach. But I think that even on a more base level, when we accept Christ and truly make a commitment to Christ as our Lord and Savior and accept that calling, I've talked a lot about this, that sense of vocation is fundamental to who we are as Christians. I don't think that you can say, I am a disciple. I think you can be saved. The criminal on the cross was saved. Does that mean the criminal on the cross was a disciple? No, he didn't have a hot second to study, to learn, to grow. Not a disciple. Doesn't mean he's not saved. Doesn't mean he wasn't with Christ in paradise. So I can say, I'm not, this isn't what I'm saying, isn't about a salvific nature, but I think it is a sense of discipleship. If we are truly engaging in active discipleship there, it is impossible for us to overlook the fact that we are called to do these things, to proclaim, to love our neighbors, to show Christ's love, to be reconcilers, to be peacemakers, all of these things, the whole kit and caboodle. And that, I believe, is the vocation that God places in us, and really the only one that matters in the end. Ministry can be done in lots of ways. I teach. There are people who are, I'm far more eloquent preachers, far more eloquent writers, better educators, all sorts of things. We all take our piece of the pie, but at the end of the day, like, as we work through this, think of your what you did for a job, who you are in that job, the underlying sort of vocation, and then who we are as Christians, which he touches on, but not quite in the same language I would like to bring to the table. So that's all I got in terms of the scriptural part. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts that they would like to express just about those sentiments?
I want the Proverbs that you read.
16:9.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Anyone online? Want to share anything?
We have a message there.
We do.
Okay.
No, it just says it's
Yeah.
recording. Yeah, it's okay. All right, all right. Anyone online want to share? I'll turn this to here. I'll do it like this. You can probably see more of you like this, and then you don't have to see Ben.
Move back.
I don't need to be seen.
All right, here we go. So, all right, no one online. No one wants to come. Okay, no one wants to come. That's great. That's
Jason?
fine. Yeah, go
Jason?
for it.
That whole concept, that we teach doesn't take account of the fact, and maybe there's nowhere in scripture that we are encouraged to listen. But it seems to me that a lot of what I'm called to do at this stage of my life is to listen to other people, not to talk to them, not to teach them. I mean, I spent 30-something years as a teacher, but that's in the past. But there are a lot of people who need a listener today.
Absolutely. I think that's the idea that there are many gifts in the body, and absolutely, some are encouragers, some are listeners, some people, some are people who just sit and, I remember when I did clinical pastoral education, and I had to go sit in I don't remember what department it was. It was the one where people go and they essentially stay on machine, like they're on dialysis or they're on something, and they're just there the whole time. But they're never gonna. There's a term for it. But I remember I had to go there and I had to sit, and they would tell me stories, and I remember it was a hard process, and it's not my gifting. People often have said you should be a coach, and I said I'm not good at a coach because that requires a lot of listening and asking questions. I like to say what I think.
And you're really honest.
I'm a much better consultant to bring me in, and I'll tell you what I think. But I do think that. But I think that in our culture in this day and age, Glenda, that probably the gift of listening is probably a greater gift I think that this is part of the challenge we've had, is to have people to actually hear you and to listen to you. And honestly, even in my own pastoral situations, just listening to people have often served better purposes than me saying anything. Yeah, Denny.
Jason, do you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
And part of that listening is sometimes, and there have been books on it, is just the simple term of being there.
Yeah.
Being present. Yeah. It's place sharing. Yeah. Ken.
Jason, I gathered that when he's talking about a vocation, he was talking about finding a meaning in life. He was talking about his grandfather that worked for John Deere, that lost his meaning in life when he lost his job or retired. And, that meaning in life could be a number of things to me.
Yeah.
When you're working, you may be a member of a service organization or a church where you're doing service type work or helping in some form or fashion. And when you retire, again, you try to find outlets like that where you can help people.
Yeah.
Or it gives you meaning in life.
Yeah.
And I see some of the young people in town, like Amanda Hartman reminds me of a person that's EMS person of the year. She has found meaning in
She's
life.
amazing.
She is amazing. And I don't want to give Jason a big head, but I mean,
He's already got one. That's okay.
but I mean, you get to looking at all the things he does. He's a teacher. He's a counselor. He's the architect of the Hiker Center. And so, and on. Citizen of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, whatever. All of those things, to me, would encompass that word vocation.
It does.
Don't forget the stick horse rodeo.
That's
announcer.
Oh, that's right.
No, but I think at the core, you hit on both of those is service.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you tap into that as well, because I see that even you as an 80-year-old, you come in and you came on the other day with a broom to shovel the sidewalks, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what are you doing here, Ken?
He
Go
washes
home.
dishes.
But I think that Lake City is probably unique in the fact that I think people don't come here with the decision. Most people don't come here with the decision just to be idle. There are some that want that life, but I think that there is still that sense of volunteerism here, that sense of service and we're losing that. I think your generation is rich with it. I think it was passed on to part of my generation. I don't think you see it as readily in some of the younger generations, sadly. So, online, Denny, you're going to say something.
Oh, no, you're okay.
No, you don't have anything you want to add? Some
I,
wisdom?
I just happened to mention you're a puppeteer also.
I haven't seen that.
I'm glad you called me a puppeteer and not a puppet.
Jason, one
Yeah.
other thing I noted in the book is he appears to me to be a very human author.
Yeah.
I think Sharon was talking about, things that baffled him. The last thing that baffles him is what's with me? This guy who's so aware of what's baffling about others, but sometimes finds himself believing one thing, saying another, and yet doing
Right.
Right.
Yeah. What page was that on?
95.
95. And strangely enough, although he's a Quaker, he sounds very Pauline. This is Pauline.
What's
Paul,
that?
like Paul, the Saint Paul.
Oh, okay.
And he writes, why do I do what I don't want to do when I don't want to do? He gets
Right.
into that little circular Greek logic, and he's, my flesh, my spirit. And I think that there's something far more comforting about that, about knowing that someone contains both, he's pretty open about his own depression and his life. And I think that makes him accessible. Someone says, I was depressed too. We can relate.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, let's dive in. Anything else? Let's go back to the end. I don't think there was much. Is there anything in the introduction that you, and I think, Ken, you started to talk about that idea of not knowing how your life or your vocation defined you. When my late father resigned or, retired from sleep apnea, this is before they had all the fancy machines they have now, but he had to retire early from anesthesiology because you don't want your anesthesiologist falling asleep while he's putting you to sleep. That's a hazard to the job. But I remember his lostness. he didn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he started I've joked before, he was a movie pirater. His hobby became recording movies, and honestly, there was a part of me that, you know, I got free movies, so it wasn't bad. But at the same time, I always mourned that a little, because I felt like there's no meaning in that. When he died, we had these Folgers boxes. I'm sure you remember, Mom. These giant boxes filled with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copy DVDs that you can't do anything with.
Wow.
Probably every single one of them is some sort of copyright violation. You know, but he's dead now, so he's
Doesn't matter now.
But we still have them.
I know, they're still in his house. We're gonna come back in January. I'm gonna bring them back and distribute them to all of you.
They're DVDs or VCRs.
No, they're DVDs. He
Oh
probably
my
has,
God.
you know, but there are like tapes of the A-Team and ER and all
Oh
these
my
things that, yeah, I
gosh.
mean, like, so I mean, but my point in saying this, I think that's true, and I think that sometimes, for Ken, I would guess that you have lived a life of service your whole life, and so when you stopped being an insurance exec or whatever you did with insurance, that it didn't stop your sense of purpose and meaning, because you found that deeper sense of meaning and service in other ways. But not everyone, I think, lives the life of service. I think people in Lake City tend to more so, but
Thank goodness.
outside of this community, a lot of people don't.
Oh, no, I know.
You know, and oftentimes after retirement, it becomes a selfish pursuit of just doing whatever you want for your own sake.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I started with IBM and IBM service. And I enjoyed helping people whose machine was broken more than I enjoyed the pay. I mean, it was a livelihood, whatever. But then that's pretty much what everything evolved into, was something of helping other people. And then when I retired, same thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I consider that my vocation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my vocation is because my profession was psychotherapist, and I think my vocation has been companioning women on their spiritual journey,
Nice.
and that just fills my soul.
Yeah.
I just
Cool.
love it. So much meaning.
Well, maybe we'll plug you into some stuff this summer.
Well, okay. Jason, can I say one more
Sure, you
thing?
can say whatever you want.
So I worked in treatment, drug and alcohol treatment, for a long time. And when I was in California, and we had a lot of men in treatment who had retired and just were lost. And so that's when their alcoholism kicked in, because they didn't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, and they could walk around all day drinking, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So,
Because they were just lost.
well, and I think in a society too, in particular coming out of your generation, you're the last generation. You're the first generation that both embraced male-female careers.
Yeah.
But also the last generation that still has that remnant from the silent generation that said that men were in the workplace and they defined who they were and their social status
Right.
by what they did.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's interesting to pause and you get caught in what you think your job is, or what, when you're growing up, certain things your parents may influence you to be,
yeah.
and or people outside and around you, and going to school and different things. But your vocation, and the check back to how we're all uniquely created, and there is a purpose in all of us that God has designed.
Yeah.
He's formed the inward vital parts.
Yeah.
And so and it can be a challenge to, and I like what he shares, the reality that we always think we're going to be everything's going to be good, but the real challenge, the real mark, I think, of vocation is that it's not always easy. It's always struggling.
Yeah.
And I thought it was especially neat on Grandpa's vocation, because the beauty was that he wasn't repairing parts or and that's kind of, it puts you in a box, sort of. You're in there, a box.
Yeah.
But was exciting, and you had to give that up. But what came back to that was that he could do all kinds of things with where he was uniquely designed to take raw materials and design something new.
Mhm.
And so
Creating.
it's the excitement of what God can do and not rely on ourselves and get in a box. I
Yeah.
think.
Well, and ministry can be, and honestly, that calling, I think that sense of, I think as Christians, we have that base sense of calling on us, and it doesn't have to be in ministry in a proper sense. I think one of the people who have ministered to me in my own life and the longevity of it was my barber, Ted Carr. He's been cutting my hair since I was in 5th or 6th grade. When I go to Columbus, and now when I don't even get a haircut, I go back just to sit with him and talk with him and have him cut my hair, just because he's been a Christian. He's been, and he has just demonstrated that you can live a life in a service type industry and have it be a ministry. And the amount of people whose lives he's touched,
Mhm.
when I think about how he touched mine, just being a listener, being like you said, Glenda, like the gift of listening while you're cutting someone's hair. What a gift. What a way to plant seeds. What a way to demonstrate God's love and hope, just in little subtle ways. And I think sometimes we want those big grandiose ways that come with, they come with platforms. But what else in this first? Okay, the first challenge. Let's go. Start with the first chapter. The accidental author. Anything relate to you in there? Starting on page 88.
Well, for me, I will tell you, I've had multiple careers, and every single one of them was purely by accident. I really resonated where he says, chase after dumb luck or fall into dumb luck, because everything that's happened to me was not anything that as a kid I said, oh, this is what I'm going to be as an adult. It's not anything that I studied for, planned on.
Yeah.
And I've had amazing careers.
Yeah.
The most amazing life. All by accident, every single one of them.
And then when you had to end, your last job was here
Yeah.
at the county.
I'd never, no, but
there
the
at
bank.
at the
I
bank,
was
or
the
at the
bank
bank, yeah.
manager. I'd never worked in a bank before.
Yeah.
I was bank
And
manager,
it's
and
been downhill ever since.
I loved
I came on
it.
the
Yeah.
scene, so she's spent
I
the whole time managing the
absolutely loved it, because I got to meet a whole nother group of people that I did not know in Lake City.
Yeah.
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 So,
That's fantastic.
yeah. And then I met Ben,
Well,
And that's
which was by accident as well,
yeah.
and was
it
very
was very.
fortuitous. Yes.
anyone else? Someone else? What else do you have? Anyone online? Anything?
I have something on 88.
88.
After it says the accidental author, I ask questions in hopes of evoking my conversation partner's inner teacher. And I like that, because I think that's one of the things that we do by listening, is connecting with that teacher within.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in youth ministry, I think I have a lot more. I think from a teaching perspective, we call it asking Socratic questions, a Socratic method of having that inner truth come out in an individual. And I think in youth ministry, I probably did that more, in part of because that's self-discovery. I think that, if I look back in the way I taught before as opposed to the way I taught now, part of the way I teach now is influenced by the fact that I traveled around for the denomination and usually didn't have an opportunity to engage with people one-on-one. It was to, a couple hundred people in front of you, and you just do what you do and you step down, you're done. But I think there is something about, teasing. And that's why this makes these conversations rich, is you can talk about those things and you can follow the rabbit trails a little bit and you can tease out the contextualization of some of the ideas. But I think that listening, that questioning, I think that's why people seek out counselors and therapists and spiritual directors, and they pay a lot of money for people. And part of that's you used to have friends that did listen to you and have solidarity with them. What else?
Jason?
Yeah.
What he says about writing, that he's only really talking about one genre. I don't know what you'd call this writing, inspirational or something, but there are many different kinds of writing,
Absolutely.
and both fiction and nonfiction. And so what he says about writing only applies to one type of writing, I guess. Whatever, what would you call this genre?
Nonfiction. I would probably call it education. I mean, if I had to classify him as a writer in a literary field, I would put him in the field of education, because most of what in the same way I would Christian formation, because they're talking. Your education is about the development or formation of individuals. You're trying to convey or form or shape or lead, guide, and
Dogs crying.
Louis?
is that Louis?
I think so.
I think it is.
Sorry.
Oh.
Maybe the
Chicken.
toilets are going.
You had to be here.
Maybe if you don't mind just taking a little peek out there and seeing that.
Can you get by?
The toilets were changed in the manse today, so they were sitting on the porch when people were coming in. That's why we're making toilet references. And maybe they're being removed now. So hopefully that's what it is. I'd love to be able to go outside and not have them there. Oh my gosh.
What?
Who's
Uh-oh.
What?
Louis
Louis
out?
escaped.
Okay, well, we'll all go chase
Well,
Louis.
no.
Let's do.
I'll go.
How about this? It's going to need to be.
You wanna,
I don't think you're going to be able.
I might
Just
be
go
able to.
get him.
I think
It's
We'll
okay.
wait.
Why don't you guys keep talking?
we will.
We go.
It may be a few minutes. I don't know.
Come
Take
sit
your
down
time.
and you can take Jason's place. Come on.
Is Jasper out there taking the toilets? Is that what happened?
I don't know. But it's gonna take two of us to get that dog. We've
let
done
me-
this before.
Jean, you can tell us about,
What?
you can tell us about him growing up. We can get all the good stuff now.
Yeah.
Now that he's gone.
Yeah, now that he's gone, you can
I
tell us
didn't
all
know
about him.
him then, so I really can't comment.
Okay, all
He's
right.
just great.
Well, I
bet he
think
was.
what we were talking about is, your vocation was helping people, and then when I retired, then we put together honor guard, because there wasn't anybody doing military honors in Brink County, and then we did, I did the youth at the church, which was probably the most rewarding.
I bet.
And some of those kids still keep in touch and that kind of stuff. So, and since I've been up here, you were saying about you haven't seen his puppeteering, the Saturday afternoon reenactment
Mm-hmm.
at 1:00. You'll have to come next year,
Oh, I
'cause
will.
we're both in it.
And he does,
Oh my
he does
God.
Yeah,
a
and
puppet
Denny
skit.
is our
Denny is
leader.
our leader,
Yeah.
our
Oh, how
fearless leader.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
Who all is involved in that?
Mhm.
Who all is
Oh,
involved?
well,
there's
quite a few of us.
People
Ben
in
and
the
I and
community.
Denny and Jason.
Hector and Jason. And
And
There's up to 20
Silas.
people.
Oh, okay,
go
yeah,
ahead,
yeah.
Denny.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there's up to 20 people.
Yeah.
And in fact, with that, I just picked up the teepee poles today, so we can put our teepee up.
Okay.
So,
Well, Danny, why don't you tell us what you think was your life's
vocation.
vocation and how that, fit with the jobs and so on?
Well, much like Sharon, I had several vocations and I switched right in the middle for several reasons. And I just enjoy life, and I've enjoyed, the thing that I've gotten more out is helping, like Jason, I've helped youth pretty much all my life. I was a coach and a scoutmaster for 30 years.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
work with youth in many, many aspects. And along with many of you teachers, I think you've found out, what I've found out is there are those that know how to do tests and can answer all the right answers, but do not know how to apply them to life.
Right.
And my goal is teaching the young folks is not just to know the right answer, but know how to apply it to your daily life or to your situation. And we were a high adventure group, and so that applied it to safety and many things. So it's I would say, and some of you who were teachers, the students, they could get an A on every test, but if you ask them what it works, they didn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I have a comment a little further down in the chapter where he talks about the things that baffles him. And the first one is, why do so many affluent Americans who have more money and material goods than they need never feel that they have enough? And then I just thought that one stood out to me. I thought they were all really poignant notes, but that one was very sad to me because it's true. And it kind of goes against the whole
Oh, did you get it?
no.
we got-
Hey, Ruby.
We've got Ruby. Ruby
Got
was
Ruby.
out too. So
Sorry, they're out chasing Louis. He got out. So anyway, I thought that one was very sad, and I thought it was rather unchristian. It kind of goes to at the very end where he says, what's baffling about himself is he's aware of himself, but he says one thing and then believes another thing and does another thing. And that's kind of like a lot of Christians, I think, say one thing out of one side of their mouth, but then they're always striving for more for me, more for me.
yeah.
If I may
Well, I
comment,
think, yeah.
Chris, you have to unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I did wrong. That same statement stood out to me, but the more I pondered it, I thought it was rather presumptuous on the author's part, because he said, why do these people always feel? Well, how does he know what people
Right.
feel? And I personally have known some people
Oh, I'm just.
who have
They slide.
Yeah.
but they sincerely believe that is their giftedness, and they give testimony that you can't outgive God. The more I give away, the more He provides for me, and so they feel that's where they are in the grand scheme of the Christian ministry. So, I don't want to presume anything on anybody else, and I thought the author did in that one case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is that Chris?
Yeah, would you say that he's actually showing a little bit of arrogance in some of his writing?
Well, he does in this whole chapter. I wasn't a real big fan of this particular
I
chapter.
wasn't either.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Good.
I thought maybe.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. I thought maybe he was talking about Steve Jobs whenever I read that.
Well, could be.
I mean, what I saw when I read that, I was thinking, well, Steve Jobs admitted after he had cancer, had I known that life was going to be so short, I would have lived it differently. And maybe that's what he's thinking. I don't know.
I didn't know that.
My problem is the opposite. If
Doesn't
I-
it- Doesn't it depend on how you use your wealth? If, when he says affluent Americans, as Chris said, some can use their wealth in a very responsible and generous way. And then you don't begrudge them that. But I also know and have some family members for whom it is never enough. They never have enough. They buy things thinking it will make them happy, and it doesn't make them happy. So then they buy something else, and they need bigger and better and the best of everything, and they're not happy. They're not content, so there is that aspect of it too. It all depends how you use your wealth and what it means to you.
And he doesn't say all well-educated. He says many well-educated people understand precisely how the material world works, but are clueless about their own
Yeah.
inner dynamics. And
That's what he says too about the affluent
Yeah.
people, many.
yeah, many. So,
Why
yeah,
do some citizens?
There's a sentence on page 97, the first full paragraph at the end. When you share your story of struggle, you offer me companionship in mine. And that's I don't have my glasses. That's the most powerful soul medicine I know. It's okay, thank you. I love that. And I think that goes back to, I think Linda was talking about listening.
and maybe Chris had something on, read it exactly right. I'm looking on page 96 where it said, I forgot the counsel of my father gave me. Remember, Park, today's peacock is tomorrow's feather duster.
I loved that.
I do too.
Yes, that was great.
So maybe Chris was right on track there,
Let's see, my pages are not,
Yeah,
Yeah, your page is on
this thing are different
Yeah.
than,
and they're
Audio
even
book
more
are different.
different on the phone.
well, and on the downloaded printed even are different. But you were talking about Steve Jobs saying it was gonna be so short. Mine's kind of different. If
Yeah.
known I was gonna live this long, I had done a lot of things different when I was younger.
The reason I said what I said about Steve Jobs, a good friend of mine worked for Steve Jobs and moved to Waco, and I went to church with him. And he said that, Steve was one of the most self-centered people, was absolutely ruthless in business.
Ooh.
And that's the reason he quit. And he said Steve was totally about himself and about money, and it was all, bottom line type thing.
Yeah.
And then whenever Steve realized he was sick, well, he said, I was wrong in
Being that
about
way.
chasing money and only
Really?
money. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, we had IBM had a.
Some of you might remember that song Tim McGraw made, hit, Live Like You Were Dying.
what song?
What was that, Chris? I'm sorry.
Pick it up. Live Like You Were Dying.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
Live
Oh,
Like
yeah,
You Were
country
Dying.
Yeah.
Sings
song,
that.
Tim McGraw.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good, Sharon.
No, Chris just said
Chris
it.
just
Oh.
said it. Very good, Chris. Huh? Yeah.
Is that the one where he says parachute or,
Yeah.
Pretty poor. When should you start planning on, you don't want to have to depend on somebody else to take care of you when you're older. People that are super, super rich, to me, that's absurd. If you want more and more just because you want more. But I always felt like it was a responsibility to live my life such that, well, for one thing, that I had a job that I was really enjoyed and all, and did get paid for it, but that I should save enough so that I wouldn't have to depend on my children to take care of me.
Right.
So at what point do you say enough is enough? I know I've got enough now because at my age, I don't think I could outlive it. But other people would say, well, as much as you've got, why don't you give a bunch of it away? So it's hard to know. If you want to be a good Christian, you do things for other people, of course. But how much should you save, if you want to call it save, keep for yourself?
yeah.
Especially when nursing homes are $6,000
Oh
a
my
month.
gosh,
Yeah.
Each.
What?
Nursing homes are
Yeah.
$6,000 a
A
month.
A
month.
month.
Or more.
I didn't
Or
know
more.
that.
Or each.
Yeah.
Per person, yes.
I think Medicare pays.
Each.
Some of it, yeah, I think.
Right.
Well, I live with Jason.
Oh,
and,
I think it was, and, deciding or figuring out what your vocation was. When I was in the 10th grade, I already knew I wanted to go into electrical. And so, I did become an electrical engineer, but everything that I did was fun. It's not like people that, do a job because they got the money, but they, hate their job.
Yeah,
I loved mine always
yeah,
and
too.
enjoyed it, but I got paid for it. So do you call that my, my vocation or something? And if somebody didn't like their job, what do you call that?
Yeah. Not to change the subject, but I kind of liked the one thing down there when they were talking about the people who were concerned about people who were more displaying too intimate affections in public, and she says, I don't care what they do, so long as they don't do it in the street and they frighten horses. And then he went on and used that thing about not
Yep,
frightening the
that was
horses.
funny.
That was funny. I'm gonna go check.
Frighten the horses.
Put your coat on, baby.
What's this dog's name?
That's Ruby.
Yeah.
Ruby?
Yes.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Yeah.
She looks like she's got a couple years on her.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, she's
Does
twelve.
she?
Yeah, I don't know how many, so.
Yeah.
I like the poem by Thoreau. My life has been the poem I would have writ, but I could not both live and utter it.
I don't get that. Live and utter it.
Couldn't live it and speak it at the
Oh,
same
okay,
time.
okay,
You've got to
got
do
it.
one or the other.
Yeah,
You
gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize he was a Quaker.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is a quiet group.
It is, it is.
Wonder if they're back.
I know, last time he ran away.
Yeah.
From a long-
He's gonna be a while.
What?
Oh,
I think he's gonna be a while.
oh
I don't
no.
hear him anywhere
Yeah,
calling him.
Last time we chased him for 2 hours, and at the end of that 2 hours, he came to rest in front of the sheriff's office and just lay down and got tired because he was chasing deers.
Oh my
Oh
God.
no. Maybe we all need to say a prayer
Yeah, I need
for
to say-
Jason
Oh.
out
Say
in
a
the
little prayer for
cold and the ice,
Jason for
chasing Louie.
Oh.
and Shannon's out there with him.
Oh
So-
Oh
no.
my God.
Well, maybe we should go on.
Further down, Glenda, do you have anything about further down? So much of this is about a writer. I had a really hard time. It was almost like it was a separate book. Ben and I wondered if we were listening to the wrong story, because all of a sudden it's all about writing.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it really,
And it's hard to relate to if you're not
Yeah,
a
if
If
writer.
you're not a writer. that's
Yeah.
right.
well, yeah, it
Hi,
kind of went
baby.
off track.
Sweet girl.
Yeah. She's the
Well, I
sweet-
think the point that he was trying to make with that was that don't write what you think the reader wants to read, or don't do what you think other people think you should do, but do what you feel is right based on your
Is that Jason?
values and so on.
Yeah.
Did you get him?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yay. See, it was our prayers.
Oh,
Wow.
how'd you get him?
The same thing we did last time this happened.
He wasn't in front of the sheriff's office, was he?
No, I think the new method is to drive out of town towards Henson Creek, down Henson Creek. One, it gets him out of town, which means you can't find him. I can't he can't get shot. He's not gonna get in trouble. He's not gonna encounter another dog. So just getting him out of town. And then we just drove basically down to the beer garden. He ran the whole way, and then when he
Wow.
was catching
He
his
got
breath,
tired.
we tackled him.
Who
Wow.
tackled him?
So, where are we at?
Yay.
Well, we're kind of,
We're getting toward the end.
yeah.
What did I miss?
Well,
Just
I
kidding.
will
No,
say
no.
we all kind of said that we weren't a real big fan of chapter 4.
Yeah, no.
It
I-
was almost like he went off track, and it's all about writing, that he was writing it for writing students
Yeah.
or something,
Right,
and it kind
which
of
we're
lost a
not.
lot of us.
No, and I think that, and as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, I resonate with this as someone who has, I don't see myself as a writer. I mean, I'm an author, I'm a published author. I've written a lot of journal articles, that sort of thing, chapters and books. And I write, but I'm not a writer.
Right.
And so for me, it's not there. I don't feel a sense of vocation of writing. I feel like writing is a means of communication for something I feel like that's in me. But what I did take from him in regards to just sort of a broader expression of that is the disposition of a writer to have curiosity.
Mhm.
I think what has made my career effective in terms of teaching is not that I am drawing interesting information and trying to construct a perfectly, I mean, I am the first to have misspeaks when I talk. I am not an eloquent speaker. I'm not. I mean, I've said that I'm not a preacher. I'm not an eloquent speaker. I'm a squeaker. But I am.
He's a screecher, not a preacher.
But I'm a communicator. I mean, and what I often do is I share with people what I'm thinking. And I think that it is probably more my inherent curiosity about life that allows me to do that than it is anything else. And I hope that as I teach, that sparks that same spirit of curiosity in those who I'm teaching.
Right.
And I resonated with that with him.
We talked about the 4 things that he talked about that baffle him.
Yeah. Where are those that?
Here are a short list of the things that
Oh yeah.
baffle me.
Oh, that's funny. I wrote an answer to all of them.
Oh, we want to hear yours.
yeah,
We want to hear yours.
I was like, these baffle you? I can answer these for you. No, he said, so why so many affluent Americans who have more money and material goods than they need never feel that they have enough? And not jokingly, I think the core of that is greed. In terms of, but I also think there's actually a much more existential, deep feeling there of the exercise of power. Earthly power is always fleeting.
Right.
And the capacity to purchase anything, experiences, material belongings, cars, houses, that is an exercise in earthly power and influence with the perceived effect of fulfilling a need. But for those of us who are Christians who approach it from a spiritual perspective, we truly believe that there's something, there's a gap there, there's a hole, there's something that we're seeking. And there's nothing in this world. I mean, I even think even in the most soulful relationship between two people, there's still something deep within us that is broken, that from a Christian's perspective, that is only fulfilled by an encounter with Christ. But I would say it is greed and in a sense of loss or loneliness or emptiness that they're constantly,
Trying to fill yourself.
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, these people can buy countries at the drop of a hat. But they could also solve the water problem in Flint at the drop of a hat.
Right.
So so you still see that brokenness. I mean, there's part, I don't know if you're all familiar with Mr. Beast. And does this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Beast, he was a Christian kid. He grew up, for years did these stupid YouTube videos. He is now on track. He's in his 20s and is on track to become the world's first YouTube billionaire.
Wow.
But he spends about $4 to $5 million a month to make videos and contents, but they're all great. But then he also on the side, he's going to Africa and he's drilling wells.
Oh,
Right.
I love that.
And
There's a story of
and
that,
so
yeah.
there you start to
That's
dig
a
into
good
Mr.
thing.
Beast. What you see is a person who is, his job is to make videos. His vocation is entertainment, but his sense of calling is still service.
Mhm.
And I think with Jeff Bezos, you don't see that in them.
No.
Michael Dell, on Michael Dell's side, he definitely is mostly focused at helping children.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a philanthropist.
Yeah.
And you see that in actors. You see that. You see that in
Yeah.
public figures. You see that in politicians. And I think that some people have it, some people don't. Some
Yeah.
people feel that sense of calling. Why do so many well-educated people understand precisely how the material world works, but are clueless about their own inner dynamics? This one's a much easier one. It's called neurodiversity. Some of the most brilliant minds and well-educated minds are so lost in that, you know, they can see the large picture of everything. They can see the way it works, how it functions. But that high extreme level of intelligence prevents them from reflecting upon their own lives and how they interact with them. And in academia, it runs wild. Those who are
Elon
often the
Musk is like
brightest
that.
minds are often the most socially inept, socially challenged, and there is a balance. And I think some, you know, and on the other side of that, so, you know, that doesn't mean that what they're not offering isn't important, but I do think that we look at them and think, you're educated, you're in a position of influence and power. Why can you not look back at your own self and see the way your own interact? And it's almost like a lack of, even if the most skilled counselor sat down with them and said, reflect upon this, there would be almost a disconnect. And I think we're recognizing that now, and sometimes we call it autism, sometimes we call it Asperger's, but neurodiversity is that larger umbrella that says people are different and people process different, and some of them are as gifted people are some of the ones who have deficiencies in other areas. Why do some citizens say they love democracy but are constantly putting it at risk with name calling, fear mongering, and ruthless scapegoating? I think tribalism and fear is what I wrote down. I think that we tribalize, we get into groups, and then we want democracy within the groups that we want it in, that to serve our own needs. I think at one point a democratic understanding in the Republic of the United States said that, again, I've said this before, that I vote for what is best for the common man, or the common human being, the common society. My vote is not an expression of my individual person. My vote is me participating in the care for a larger community. And I think when we can say we like that, but when we are trapped in this world that is so myopic and constantly looking at our own perspective and our own existence in the world, that the democracy becomes a minute or a petite democracy, or a miniature, micro democracy of our own little tribe. And we would almost, in regard, to be better off dividing up into states and letting people live in the state that best represents them. But the whole point of the United States was meant to say, we are going to overcome our differences, and we are going to stand on something that actually unites us. Now, obviously, that's been lost in decades recent. But and I think the last, these are just flippant answers, but what is with this, with me, this guy who's so aware of what's baffling about others, but sometimes finds himself behaving or believing in one thing or saying another and yet doing other. And I wrote the body spirit dichotomy.
Yeah, and he goes on to emphasize that on that same page 95 at the bottom. He says, in fact, to believe that our spiritual lives are without contradiction is worse than faithfulness.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's faithless to be so afraid of the contradictions in ourselves and our religious communities that we pretend that there aren't any.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me why I think in this congregation I think for some people I've pushed you. I've said we don't need to believe in inerrancy to have faith. But I think for so long we had these things that said, oh, if you don't believe in inerrancy, you're not a Christian. Well, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, and I think that opening that up allows to say that you can have both God's infallible word present in the scripture and also errors in the scripture, and one does not negate the other. But when your entire faith rests on the doctrine of inerrancy and hopes, so that's, those are the sort of contradictions that say, it's human flesh. We have seen broken humans transmit words. We've seen translations. We've seen, there are all sorts of things that have happened. That doesn't mean that the essence of what God is doing is not still existing in that space.
Jason?
Yeah, go for it.
I keep thinking, as he, in several of these chapters, he kind of sets up this ideal of how we are supposed to live our lives. And some of you may be familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, or inventories like that. And, lots of us have had to do those in workplaces. And when we've done those, the message behind that is there are different types of personalities. And I think God created different types of personalities. Some of us are innately more introspective. and able to kind of look at how we're living. Some people are just, I don't know, live more intuitively or just without stopping to evaluate everything. And we all are creatures of God. And I just think, isn't it okay to be different? Do we all have to be a certain pattern?
No, and I don't think the scriptures portray that. In fact, I would say that from the very beginning, you look at the story of the Tower of Babel, and the reason, again, the Tower of Babel ended up in the way it did was not that God was afraid that they were going to build something into the heavens and reach God. Like, that's ridiculous. In particular, with our current understanding, you go to Dubai and see the tallest building in the world, and that's way taller than anything that they built in the time of Babel. But the problem with the Tower of Babel is everyone was coming together to be united over a common language, a common place, a common culture. And God said no. In both the Adamic covenant and the Noahic covenant, God establishes the idea: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And that gathering in was in direct contradiction to the sending out. Yeah, and this is the same notion of not keeping the Great Commission in Jerusalem for the Jews in Jerusalem, but it's always an outgoing. It's always sending. And that idea that in that instance you had all of a sudden other languages and God confused them, those sort of things add up to the point where diversity was instituted by God in that regard. There are many gifts, many body, and it's overcoming those earthly differentiations and recognizing, I think, the uniqueness of how we belong together that actually I think there's a sense of commonality, but I think, Glenda, what it comes down to is the problem we have in our current day culture, in my opinion, is that we have prioritized embodiment in our human experience over and against who we're called to be in a spiritual existence. That doesn't mean that our physicality doesn't exist. It doesn't mean our distinctions exist. That doesn't mean our race or sexuality or gender orientation doesn't exist. Those are all things that are a part of our human existence. But what we seem to fail to be having a conversation about in the Christian landscape in North America is that the goal of the gospel is not to have us focus our gaze on our human existence in this world, but our heavenly citizenship beyond this world.
I have a question. If you go on down from what we were talking about, why do so many people do this and that, and you come down here and it says, starting in other areas, speaking of fakery, one of the great temptations, then the next paragraph, or on down, the third paragraph, it says, I've never felt obliged to share the whole of my brokenness in public. And those next few sentences, and I struggle with the soul needs its secrets. I didn't understand what that was all about. I just didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I put a circle and a question mark by it too. The soul needs secrets. Well, here's the thing. What I would say is I don't, in an idealized Christian world, the soul doesn't need secrets because we can confess every sin we had before God and God accepts us, but the world does not, because we still live in this world. And growing up in the Assemblies of God, where I saw some grown adults stand up on a stage and admit things that no junior hire should be hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. I also think that maybe, confession doesn't necessarily mean before the entire assembly. But I think I think what he is driving at, the point at what he's making, he's doing it from a slightly skewed context and not necessarily from the Christian context, is that we don't want to fake who we are. And I think being real, and what he's trying to find is balance. He's trying to avoid you hearing him say, you got to be real, you got to reveal your weaknesses and your brokenness, and you saying, this is every way I'm broken. And people are like, that's too much information. TMI, you got to keep some of that under to yourself. But there's a balance between that. And I do think there's something about the top, he says, in my experience, there's only one way to make myself and my faith and my world appear to be consistent and coherent: to fake it. and I don't normally speak for God, but I'm quite sure that the God of reality does not favor fakery, which among other things keeps us from confronting our own need for transformation.
I don't understand
Now,
that.
well, what he's saying is that sometimes we hide all of our foibles and our shortcomings so that the world thinks we're perfect or that we have it all together. And what he's trying to do, and he does throughout all of his writing, is he reveals his brokenness. And I think I think that I've tried to live my life that way. I try to reveal my brokenness, but in a measured amount. Because the goal is not to have a confessional session for Jason. The goal is for you to understand that to not put me on a pedestal. You know, quite frankly, you mentioned Citizen of the Year and Volunteer of the Year. This was a rough summer because I felt like the whole summer I was on a pedestal and I had to live up to this. And there were times where I was exhausted in the summer and I had to fake it. I had to fake being engaging with someone in the street, not because I don't care about them, but because I was depleted. And so there is some sense of, you want that sense of realness and brokenness. And I think that allows us to be in solidarity with one another.
I agree.
It's grace that we're all broken. I'm broken
Yeah.
more than all of you. Maybe not Denny, but
You're broken the most? I'm the most broken.
No, you don't even want to start.
What are you gonna
I
say?
just say
What are you gonna
those-
say, Denny?
I say those things. I say that to make Pat laugh. That's all I'm trying to do. Is I like to make.
Oh,
Pat
we
laugh.
lost her. Pat, where'd you go? We lost her.
She fell out
fell
of her chair
backward.
with laughter.
Yeah. There she- Oh.
What else? What else did you see in there? Anything else you want to mention? You already mentioned everything.
Pretty much in that.
I have a question then.
Yeah.
Do you think his writing and what he's saying then, by him writing and sharing, makes him feel better? And that's why he does it?
Oh, I think I think every writer is. I mean, they say all writing is autobiographical. And I think, and that's probably some truth in every theological paper I've ever written in my life. It is, it's the story of me in my own search. I wrote a lot about the doctrine of providence. Why? Because I struggled with it. I wrote about Taizé because I was involved. Because I wrote about intergenerational formation because it's been a transformation in my life. It's always autobiographical. In that regard, as a difference to like acting or dancing where someone else might be giving you a piece that you're then performing. Writing is always a personal endeavor, but most of us don't spend our lives writing. I mean, so there's a disconnect.
On page
I
100, he
can't help
says, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just
Comment.
thinking of teaching, the
Oh,
profession
say,
of
Chris,
teaching,
welcome
and
back to you,
that
Chris.
writing is a way to integrate and apply what you're studying. You study, you might write what you think about it. It's your reaction to things. And then you analyze it. And then you engage with others and share. So writing is a way of learning and a way of like in your spiritual walk as a Christian, you journal things and you integrate.
It's processing, and I think for some people, but it's not for everyone. I think that's the. I don't know what's going on here, Ben.
I don't know. It just.
This is good. Everything that's possibly going
There we
on
go.
over there. Okay.
Well, Denny, to answer your question, he writes, writing allows my mask to fall away so my true face can appear and I can get a clearer look at things I need to be facing into. So yeah, he does it for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
But nothing wrong with that, but yeah, he does it for himself.
One of the things that I struggle with was further on down, and he talks about my writing. When my writing isn't going well, which happens a lot, I must be willing to commit conceptual suicide again and again and just tear up the pages I've labored over for hours and start over. And I think that's my biggest problem when I'm trying to fix an issue or whatever. All this work I've done, I want to throw it away. Can I change it a little bit and rather than just start from the beginning again? I struggle with that a lot.
It's called killing your darlings.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say in total, I ended up with about a 250-page-ish dissertation from a PhD, but I had about 180 pages that I cut out.
Wow.
So that gives you, well, I should say that I cut out. that my advisor cut.
Big difference.
Chris, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just one without beating a dead horse here, but the thing about fakery, to paraphrase, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. And tradition has it that that's a bad situation. I don't think it is at all. A good leader will surround themselves not with people like themselves, but with complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
And people who will ask hard questions and be the devil's advocate for them. And a lot of organizations fall into malaise simply because they all have the same head on the shoulders. And so the concept of a square peg in a round hole is a good thing, I think, if it's used that way.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the intentionality too, and everything that runs through this book is at the end you could summarize it: live an intentional life. And I think you're right, that sense of malaise is absolutely there. So you're and what else? Anything else? When I just turned the page and it said conceptual suicide at the bottom of what you're talking about, Ben, and I wrote permanence. I think one of my biggest demons of writing is it's putting it down on paper and having it be permanent. It actually took me a lot when I came here to be okay with recording the sermons. I resisted it for a while. Because I can say whatever I want off the cuff, and if you don't have a recording of it, then
Did it really happen? You can deny it.
but the minute you record it, someone can go back to it, and then in the next level is you write it, then you're really in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you're going to be critiqued. So I mean, but I think that there is something, but I also think that there's a resolution in one's ideas that come out. When we have, not even in the exercise of writing, but sometimes just in the exercise of communicating. Sometimes when you say to someone, "Hey, share with me what's going on," and just in being able to verbalize something, bring that out, they have some sense of therapy or that sense of balance in their life. Unfortunately, this was not my favorite chapter too. I think because I felt like it dealt more with his own life and writing than. Which I suppose if you were a Palmer person and you'd read his first 9 books, it would be like anything else? Yeah.
I did kind of like the metaphor that each of us, in a sense, our lives are the thing we're writing. He talks about the poem I would have written. And that he was inspired by Thoreau, who kind of gave him that idea that my life has been the poem, that he didn't really have the time to write because he was too busy living his life. But Thoreau had, some pretty interesting philosophies himself about living simply, and that was the best way to live. Simplify your life and it will have more meaning. And I think living with intentionality, as you've said, living with some retrospect on what we're doing is kind of careful writing that we should be doing, or editing that we should be doing as we go, probably.
Well, and the funny, writing, I think, again, going back to, I think you're right and you're spot on there. I think the challenge is that not everyone writes, therefore, but the engagement and what he's talking about the process that he goes through to write, to express what he's going through is ultimately, I think, what he's pointing to that we should go through. It's sort of that revaluation of their lives, and maybe in a moment we can end on that poem, but I do think it goes from young to midlife to older to death, and that would be a nice place to end. But two other small quick things I want to point out just for the church as a whole. On page 104, he talks about smashing clay pots and calling it iconoclasm, which the idea is just to rid ourselves of the idolatry of things that we're idolatrous toward in life. But then when he says, I think it's the beginning of the third paragraph down, when people of any tradition insist that the treasure cannot be carried except in their earthen vessels, they commit idolatry. And sometimes people die. Idolatry is a driver behind all religious violence. And I would say, even out, I think he's talking about kind of religious wars on the interfaith side of it. I mean, we're watching that right now. What that's happening in Israel Palestine is not a ethnic war; it's a religious war at its core. But we, I think, sometimes even when our mainline Catholic, Orthodox, evangelical, non-denom, all of us have a certain level of pride. Oh, we've figured out, we got it right. And it's the idea that we are carrying the gospel in its best form. And I think that right there is probably the checkpoint we all need to remember that I mean, my hope would have been the perspective we would all have of going through 2,000 years of church history this summer, that what we would leave with is a greater sense of humility that we probably don't have it right. And we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to live faithful and intentional, but in the end of the day, the reminder that we probably don't have it right is really where the disposition we ought to be taking as we approach everything.
Well, and I think that we're not better than.
Yeah, except for Joel Osteen. He got it wrong, and we're all better than him.
But I have hope, though.
For Joel?
For the religions. I know that and I think that's being here is a big part of it. But I remember growing up as a Catholic in the various religions in that town, there was real, I mean, you would commit a mortal sin if you went to a Methodist church.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. I think as people back and forth, and you see things with our community services here that give me hope that we might see that more.
I think we're evolving as a society. I want to say as a world. Honestly, the stuff that I saw over in with Hamas and what was going on, I mean, all of it, like depravity exists in ways that we can't fathom.
Right.
Again, if my biggest problem of the day is I had to go chase my dogs, then I live a pretty blessed life. But there is that sense, I think, I mean, you look out into the world and you see that just sense of, I don't know,
Evil.
Yeah, evil. Yeah. And in fact, as you're saying that, I wrote down same in my my margins here. It says on page 1111, I've been feeling stuck about many things, including how to respond to the world's nonstop saga of suffering. Now, keep in mind, this was written when? What was the year? I don't even remember the publication date.
90 something.
This was written in
It was?
2018.
Okay.
So before the pandemic.
I thought it was new.
Well, some of this stuff was written. Actually, some of this stuff was written much earlier. But he says, I've been feeling stuck about many things, including how to respond to the world's nonstop saga of suffering, the ongoing carnage in the Middle East, the endless episodes of mass killings in the United States, like we just.
Exactly.
Today,
we're dealing with around the world, racism deep in the DNA of my native land. Absolutely. Our collective blind eye to radical economic justice and climate change. Yeah. In grotesque parading, grandstanding the political leaders who does anyone know what, I didn't even look up that word. I don't know what it means.
I've never seen it.
Bloviate. Does anyone know what that means? I'm assuming it means, who, I don't know. Does anyone know? Hey Siri. What's bloviate mean?
Like you're kind of like a windbag. You're expounding.
like full of hot air about God and prayer while doing squats about gun violence and other evils. I mean, I feel like how many years later, he's before our pandemic, before the, he's dealing with, and this is where our culture is. I mean, how do you feel, and then, but he goes down, he says, forgive me for adding a trivial personal problem to my major list of social ills, but we all live at the intersection of our small worlds and the big one around us. And when I read that, I was like, holy cow, that is so Lake City.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like to the nth degree, our little teeny bubble in the world. And then he goes on, if we want to serve others, we must attend to both. And I think there's a challenge in that, because when we do live in this small place, we have, I think, as a faith community, we're attending to those things in our community. We're attending to the hikers, we're attending to issues, we're trying to bring peace. But it's so difficult for us to attend to that broader
We're not
world.
attending worldwide.
And I do think that we have the capacity, and that's why continually in worship I point us to trust. It's about our trust in God. That's where it has changed, because if we feel confident, not ignoring it, but that it's in God's control. Because I can't do anything in the Middle East. There's absolutely, and anything I did try to do, I could give my entire life savings to an organization that's providing aid there, and yeah, I would make a difference. It would make some packs are sent there, but in the end, it's not really something that is directly from me.
Yeah.
But I can pray, and I can be in solidarity. And if we believe that prayer actually has influence and effect, that not only it changes us as the prayer, but that it actually influences the way God functions and acts in the world. So, all right. As we close, why don't I read this poem, and we'll let that. Before we begin, was there anything about the poem you wanted to highlight?
Which one?
On page 108, the poem I would have writ.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Does anyone have? Glenda?
Just talk about the schedule coming up before we quit, okay?
Okay, you mean next week? Next week's the same as usual, without the dog interruption.
What about the following week?
What's the following week? I don't know what the.
Christmas.
Are we off? Are we off? We did take a week off, so we might be off. We might have to go back after the new year. But we're definitely on for next week.
Okay,
Is that good? Or is there something going on
That's
that I'm
good.
not aware of?
no,
Okay.
that's good.
We're definitely we'll go all the way up. I mean, I don't know what you all want to do. We can feel it out towards the end. There's no hurt in taking some time and taking a week off, as it's just episodic. But let's plan that. We'll go week to week. We'll plan for next week. Is there anything anyone want to say about the poem before I read it? Okay. The poem I would have writ. My life has been a poem I would have writ, but I could not do both and live and utter it. That was by Henry David Thoreau. The first words are the hardest. Sound surrounds you in the womb, grows louder when you're born. You listen for the day. You listen for the day will come when you must speak words too. That's how we make our way through this trackless landscape called the world. But how? And what to say? And what does saying do? Later, words come easily. You learn to speak the language of what you want and need to help you find a pathway into and through your life. To make it clear what you believe, reach out to friends, find work to do, heal your wounds, ease your fears, get chance on chance to give love and to receive. Sometimes words leap out of you in ways you soon regret, or in ways so magical you silently rehearse them, hoping never to forget how they came out of the blue, demanding to have life breathed into them by you. Then you learned that first words aren't the hardest are the last. There's so much you want to say, but time keeps taking time and all your words away. How to say, amid the flood of grief and gratitude you feel, thank you, or how beautiful, how grand, or I don't know how I survived, or I was changed forever the day we two joined lives and hands. As you reach for your last words, you realize this is it. This ebbing tide of language called your life, words trailing into silence, returning to the source. This unfinished poem you would have written, had it not been for the heartache and joy of all the years you've been looking at.
That's beautiful.
And in the end, the beauty of that, I think, comes down to the idea that we don't all have to be writers. But what he is calling us to is to live our lives intentionally. So, and with that in mind, may the grace of God be with you as you go. And thank you for your grace as I chased my dog. We'll see you online on Sunday. And if for those of you who don't know, today is St. Nicholas Day.
Oh.
So you should go home and eat something ginger.
I'm drinking ginger tea.
There you go. Very
Oh my gosh,
apropos.
you're covered.
Yes.
So we'll see you all next week, folks, or see you Sunday.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.